Hello all, Mike Davis here from the city of Brooklyn Park, and I appreciate the opportunity to address all of you, albeit remotely. I wish I could be there, but time and budget constraints, as they are, has prohibited me from making the journey. So I want to have a conversation with you, even though it's one way, but convey to you some thoughts about really what the purpose of police is, and how really it's germane to the conversation that you all are having about democracy and how to promote it, and what healthy democracy looks like through community engagement. Now, you should know from the onset that Brooklyn Park is a city about 5 miles outside of North Minneapolis. It's about 80,000 people. It's a second most diverse city in the state of Minnesota, only next to a much smaller city contiguous to our south called Brooklyn Center. We're about 20% foreign-born, and again, 48% overall diversity. And we're really, I think, a leader in the Midwest in terms of how we approach, administering city services and delivering police services. For the past 5 years, I've had the privilege of being the police chief here, and we've done some great things. For the past 21 years, I've been serving as a police officer in the state of Minnesota, starting out in Minneapolis. So this role at this time, over the past several years, has caused me to be reflective and introspective about why I do this job, and more importantly, what is the purpose of police? Truly, what is the purpose of police? Is it to simply enforce laws, or is there a larger purpose that sometimes we miss? Michael Neela, a prominent police trainer and former commander of the Aurora, Illinois Police Department, talks about the nobility of policing, and that we're not simply law enforcers, but we're guardians of this democracy. And that makes sense to me, right? If you look at, in essence, what we're trying to accomplish, we're trying to deal with the conditions that contribute to crime and disorder. That, to me, is what success looks like. Now, for those of you who've studied policing, understand that we're technically in the community policing era, right? There are 3 eras of modern policing. First is the political era, then the reform era, and now we're in the community policing era. I would submit that we're going into yet another era, and that's the community building era. It really acknowledges the larger role and purpose that law enforcement plays. I can see there's some skeptics in the audience, so I have some evidence. Some evidence that's born out of research. Research that was done in Chicago, that's the kind of the petri dish of many researchers around the country, by Dr. Robert Sampson of Harvard University. In the 1990s, Robert Sampson did a pretty robust and highly respected body of research called the Project of Human Development in Chicago Neighborhoods, looking at the dynamic of juvenile violence. What he found is that not only was he able to identify patterns of behavior that led to violence on behalf of the juveniles, on the part of juveniles that lived in Chicago in certain neighborhoods, he also identified some community characteristics. In some cases, some community characteristics that of themselves reduce the likelihood of violence in many areas by a significant percentage. That caught my interest. What are these dynamics? What are these things that community members are doing on their own that's leading to a reduced level of violence? What he found in these neighborhoods, everything else being equal, same socioeconomic status, same demographic makeup, what he found is that there are 2 primary factors, 2 behaviors that existed. First, people had a benevolent sense of the whole, right? People knew, trusted, and would do for one another. And second, a very actionable thing and easily understood, is that individuals, adults, were willing to intervene when they observed children misbehaving. A key component, right, to a thriving community, especially keeping order amongst our youth and putting them on a path of success, or at least away from the path of violence. So, there's evidence that supports this notion that our work is to build what Robert Putnam calls in his book Bowling Alone, social fabric, right? The underpinnings of any successful community is those relationships that exist in a very actionable way. Robert Sampson coined the phrase collective efficacy, which really has 3 parts to it. First is this notion of proximal relationships. All right, so I know you in my community. I know you as a member of my community, as a neighbor. The second is working trust. I know you and I trust you. Not with my bank records or our bank account, but I trust you as a neighbor, right? And thirdly, it's this notion, right, of actionable expectations. That we have the shared expectations that we do for one another when there's a need to do for one another. And then we create something in our community to make it better where nothing existed. I believe our role is to promote such an environment in our communities. At the essence, and research shows us out, at the essence of any community that's plagued by crime is social disorder. Social disorder is bred from, right, low levels of interdependence, high levels of isolation, and typically high levels of fear. The police are in a primary role to combat those things and change the ethos in those communities. That is our primary responsibility. How this intersects with democracy is simple. What we know is that communities that have low levels of collective efficacy, are isolated and fearful, also have low levels of involvement in the democratic processes, the underpinnings of what it means, right, to be a responsible citizen in this community, in this country, is to be involved in these processes, and these folks aren't. And so by expanding the level of collective efficacy, by enhancing social fabric, we are, I would submit, promoting democracy in the true sense of the word. In Brooklyn Park, we've begun such work of community engagement. In 2009, we called a meeting. We called community cafes actually around the community, and we had 400 people show up. Residents of all different backgrounds, people have been here 5 minutes in 50 years, sitting around at tables in small groups, having conversations with people they would not normally be talking to about a topic they don't typically talk about, the future of the community and what it looks like. And what came out of there was a communal definition of what the City of Brooklyn Park will be. That led to the establishment of a core planning team, which was a collective of our diverse residents and city staff, which led to the production of our plan, our strategic plan, that bore out of it 3 action teams, actually 4. Resources, which believes fundamentally that we have a community of abundance, and that the coalescing and activating of those community members really creates a future that we all want. Second, a youth team that's dedicated to ensuring the success of all of our youth. And thirdly, a team that's dedicated to enhancing the understanding and acceptance and valuing of our diverse residents. And the 4th team is a measurement team, that we're measuring our progress along the way. This has led to an activation of resources in our community. This has led to a higher sense of livability, higher sense of cohesion, and a higher sense of belonging in our community. It is a perpetual process. You don't wave the flag of victory all the time, right? You count the small successes, which segues into larger ones. But our role as a police department is to promote such. We have changed our business practices wholesale. We believe in a net-centric, right, community building approach, where officers are assigned in teams from various disciplines around the department to work diligently on changing those conditions that contribute to crime and disorder. That's our focus. Law enforcement is a tool, not the tool or not the end game, but a tool to achieving our results that we're all looking for. So this is more sophisticated than community policing, which is defined merely as working with the community, right, to achieve X results. This is activating and working alongside and promoting, in some case prodding the community to come together, to have a higher level of interdependence and really work together in a way that they haven't thought of before. Our role is to reduce the dependency on law enforcement, increase the interdependency on one another, and promote this thing we call a democracy. That's the work of the Brooklyn Park Police Department, and I believe that is the future of policing in the United States. Thank you. I appreciate your time, and have a great rest of the conference.